So I call this meeting to order. I have one, to read my disclosure that I'm an employee of the City of Charlottesville within the City Parks and Recreation Department. I hereby declare that during the city's discussion of the proposed budget, relative to the issues related to city employees, anything regarding cost of living increase, living wage, health benefits, similar fiscal matters related to city employees individually and collectively referred to in this written disclosure as the transaction. I may have a personal interest in the transaction as that term is defined by Virginia Code 2.2-3101 by reason of salary or compensation or employee benefit that I receive as a city employee in excess of $5,000 annually. I have previously consulted with the Office of the City Attorney on this matter and received an opinion that pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3112B1, even with this personal interest, I may lawfully participate in the City Council discussion of the transaction because I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons, city employees, and a member of which are affected by the transaction. I hereby affirm that I am able to participate in this transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Murphy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, tonight we're here to have a first budget work session after the presentation of the manager's budget. And in great part, we will have the PowerPoint review some of the points from Monday night, since it wasn't really focused on leading you to a discussion, really just to present and make that public. But then as we get to the end of the presentation, it is our hope to tee up some critical matters for you to weigh in on. There are some decision points that we want to start getting underway this evening. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Beauregard to get us started.
Great, thank you, Mr. Murphy. So we're gonna, since you've seen a lot of this before, and this was the public presentation for the most part, I have no idea what's going on here. We're gonna try to go through this quickly, but if you have questions, obviously you can interrupt us at any time and ask questions, and then we'll get to the end for those decision points. So here's our basic agenda, and we'll of course have public comment at the end as we usually do. So I just wanted to quickly bring up Balancing Act, which has been updated for fiscal year 20. So if you feel like playing with this, I welcome folks to go on our website. You can actually submit a balanced budget, which is pretty cool. And we compared last year's results with this year in terms of page views, which increased by 1,000. Online submissions went from 84 to 277, and the average time on site stayed about the same. We're looking at ways to actually use this further in other situations besides this. It has a lot of capacity and it gives us a lot of interesting data. Interestingly though, what the results we received were different from last year. Nobody played with revenues. Everybody played with expenditures. And to get a balanced budget, you had to reduce as many expenditures as increase. And so all the increases basically went to the schools under these scenarios, and decreases were in Parks and Recreation, Financial and Internal Services, and Public Safety. So we're going to actually add, I think, an open-ended question to the 20. It might already be on there. Not yet? Okay, we'll let folks know when that gets on there so that we can have people answer open-ended questions about what they would like to see as well as we finish up the 20 budget. And with that, we'll move right into the revenue detail. And again, I'm going to try to go through these quickly. These are the first part of the local taxes. The large one on this obviously is real estate. As we mentioned in the presentation on Monday night, the rate was advertised at 97 cents. This budget, however, is built around a 95-cent increase. So if City Council chooses to increase, they may. That by advertising it higher, it gives Council the ability to do that. But this budget specifically is built around 95 cents. Some of the other large items on here are sales and use tax. And personal property tax. And what I'll do is I'll just roll through these, and if you have any questions as we're going through, you can let me know and we can answer questions on any of these. Okay?
So this is a slide we talked about Monday night, really to just show you at a couple different tiers within residential assessments, what the impact is of the assessment increases that have already gone through. And just remind you that in general on the residential side, the average was about 8.7%. And so you see that there is already some impact on folks' budget, even at the very lowest level, a minimum of $10 a month to their mortgage payment, and considerably more as houses gain value. We do believe that this isn't really just for homeowners, right? That there is some impact on folks who are renters too, as landlords experience these costs and then pass those costs along. We did show you on the right-hand side of the chart what the further impact would be if you were to add to the real estate tax, so that you would understand that the impact that's there already continues to grow. I just want to remind you one time that these are averages, right? For this demonstration, you're aware, I'm sure, from individual constituents that there are different areas of the city that had much more significant impacts than the average.
This next slide wraps up the local taxes portion, and the two large ones on here obviously are transient occupancy or lodging tax and the meals tax, and Mr. Murphy will review the impacts of those on the next slide. But before I move on, are there any questions about anything on this slide other than lodging and meals? Okay.
So this is the illustration of the impact on meals tax rate. Want to point out that on this proposed increase from the manager's budget, that we're still in the middle of the pack, that there's 38 peer Virginia cities, that numbers 19 through 27 would be tied at 6%. So at least in the middle, if not the bottom third, roughly, when you think about where we'd be situated with meals tax. A reminder again that this 1 cent increase or 1% is really, you buy a sandwich, a 10-cent difference from what the bill is today, and so on and so forth at the different price points. I do want to reinforce the idea that these are straight pass-through. They don't impact in any way the price of the goods themselves. The dollars for your sandwich or your steak or whatever that meal may be, the taxes are then collected after the fact, whether they're the state tax or the local meals tax. One of the things we wanted to do is to really illustrate, based on the fact we had some discussion with council about what their appetite might be for some revenue enhancements based on trying to meet so many priorities in the budget, was to show the difference in impact between meals and real estate. A couple of those key points are, eating out is a choice, but people do it, right? At every income threshold, we used the consumer expenditure survey from the Bureau of Labor, as we talked about the other night. Real estate taxes are a required tax and get passed on. We've talked about the general average of those real estate taxes. We do know also on meals tax that 35% of it or more is paid by people who are not local residents. So this is another revenue enhancement that we discussed. This is the lodging tax, or the TOT, transient occupancy tax. At 8%, again, we would be really, I think, both 4th in the state or 19th in the state, right? There's just a lot of localities that are grouped in the same spot by percentage at the 8% that we've proposed. And we've talked about that while there is some regional data that would reflect that there's a change in two things, occupancy and something that is called RevPAR. I think, this is really going to cause me to have a medical condition at some point, there are two drivers for that. One is that most of that impacts in the county. We've been fairly good in the city. Our revenue has continued to be increasing and/or flat at times with lodging. And I think that we have to reconcile the fact that we added nearly 400 rooms, right? And there is this supply and demand effect when you have that much more stock, that it does drive the average daily rates down a bit for some of the hotel rooms, which is, I know that you all have had some data presented to you by the CACVB and other groups. That's the data that they're looking at.
And I did send a response earlier about the comment that was made on Monday night about the, thank you, the
Credit card
discount, but it didn't have anything to do with credit card fees. It was the discount which we offer, the city currently offers on meals. So if you file on time, you receive a 3% discount.
File and pay.
Excuse me?
File and pay on.
Thank you, file and pay on time. So the city can do the same for lodging, and we provided an impact of that. It would actually be about $180,000 because you would have to take that off of the revenue estimate, presuming that, that would be the impact. So that is an option. We can talk about that at the end if you'd like. And Todd Divers is here to answer more questions about that. But that's the program that was referred to on Monday night. It didn't have anything to do with credit card fees. So. Okay, moving on to licenses and permits. The largest one here being business professional license, which is what businesses pay to do business in the city. The one for the mall vending permits is not actually zero. We do collect those fees, but those are now being directly routed to the capital improvement program to help support mall infrastructure, or mall maintenance, basically. So if there are any questions about these, we'd be happy to answer.
So this is revenue that used to be captured and then used for the operational side and NDS. We decided it was more appropriate to capture it to take care of the mall infrastructure, so it's going over to Parks and Rec, who takes care of the mall.
It'll show up later on the revenue. This is the first part of intergovernmental revenue. We have a lot of different arrangements with state agencies, with the schools. These are the school resource officers at the bottom, and then the PPTRA revenue, which is the flat revenue we receive from the state for the personal property tax relief. Okay, and on the next slide, this continues intergovernmental revenues. This includes our fire department agreements we have, the joint facilities with JDR and the magistrate's office, and then some payments that we receive from UVA. Okay. Charges for services, which mainly are our waste disposal fees, which are basically our stickers and our decals. We have the emergency medical services fee in here, which is something council approved last year. And some smaller items around property transfers and circuit court subscriptions and utility cut services. Any questions about these? Okay. Under miscellaneous revenue, these are just revenue that we can't really categorize. These are rent, interest earned. The parking garage, I'll just say this since it looks like it's zero, it's not zero. Now it's nothing. Can't see it. It's all going to the parking fund, which we established a few years ago. So we do collect the revenue. It just goes now into its own fund, which council approved several years ago. So that's been happening for a couple of years now. On this page, you see some of the previous fiscal year carryover funds that we budgeted as part of the 19 budget, which we're not doing as part of the 20 budget. And then transfers from other funds, which we're also not doing as much of. We don't like to do transfers. Those are usually, we consider those one time. So you can see that we have two items, the landfill and human services fund. The parking enterprise fund, we can't completely take out those general fund revenues I'm sorry, this is so annoying, I apologize. So we're slowly reducing those transfers until all the funds are going into the parking fund, and so, but that's gonna take some time to do. Yeah, this is crazy. Okay. All right, so that's, okay, this is the last slide for revenue, designated revenue. Did I miss a slide?
I did have a question.
Yeah, sure, if I can get back to it. Go ahead.
So the revenue sharing delta we have here is the 2.8. I'm just confused about different times we've checked in on that number. I feel like it's been different at different times.
Okay, so if I can get to the next slide, which I will eventually, okay. So if you take that 2.8 number, that's just the operating side. If you go to the designated revenue, city-county revenue sharing transfer to CIP increased by 1.3 million. That's another piece of the CIP, of the city-county revenue sharing. Another piece is transfer to facilities repair fund. That stayed steady at 400,000, so that didn't change. If you add those two numbers together, you get the negative 1.5 million that we lost overall from city-county revenue sharing. It's just the way they're split among the budget. Good gracious, okay. Seriously. Sure, if we can do that. Okay. So once you get to the designated total, that gets you to the 188.8 million for the total general fund budget. And we're going to do a quick switch. So are there any questions while we're sitting here waiting for our technology to work?
I have one quick question.
Sure.
And I was reviewing this when you sent it out earlier today when I was looking at it, specifically for this slide, when we look at the city-county revenue sharing. And we've gone, the actuals from 2017-18, 10.2, to the adopted was 9.9, and then the revised being 9.9. And then this year, just to be clear, to make sure that I'm understanding it, you're saying there's 2.8 less that we're getting from the revenue share? No? Okay.
You have to add these numbers together. So if you look at the 7 million in 20,
Okay.
you need to then add to that number 6.7 million as a transfer to the capital budget, the CIP.
Got you.
Plus 400,000. That gets you to the total city-county revenue sharing number.
Got you.
So
Okay.
it's in 3 different spots.
3 spots. Okay.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay.
So the total is more like 14 million
Okay.
if you add it all together.
That we're getting
Yep,
from the
yep.
revenue share.
But it did go down 1.5 million. We told you
Gotcha.
that back in January.
Got you.
Yep.
Got you. Okay.
So,
And are we going to be going over in detail what the capital budget looks like? Because I know we talked about the Elliott Street project.
so we have
but
that
is
work
in
session
there?
next week.
Okay,
So
all
we'll
right.
have a full
Okay.
work session on the capital budget, which is why I was suggesting on your question about the bypass fire station, that we hold that and let
Okay.
us do some research on that. And then we can have that, we can add that to the discussion next week, for sure. Yeah.
Right, because, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we knew exactly what this capital budget was for.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that next
Okay,
week.
thanks.
So this is just the operating
Got it.
budget.
And the revenues.
And the revenues.
Well, that's why it's hard, because I think that the revenue discussion does still relate to the capital program.
In terms of
Continue
debt
to have that
service.
discussion next week, too. I mean, we can get some thoughts about how you feel about the revenue this week, but we understand that next week, when the CIP discussion happens, that's when most of those decisions could be made around that. And so, yeah, we have some time to do that. Okay, hopefully this will work better.
I'll be your clicker. Tell me
Oh, you
when to
will?
stop.
Oh, nice, thank you. All right, you can stop right there.
There we are.
Okay, so now we're going to move to expenditures.
So, one of the enhancements is to provide additional tax grant and relief through CHAP, and to add some tiers and potentially even look at a full relief tier. Our current estimate, along with changing the income threshold from $50,000 to $65,000, is that we need to add $285,500 to the pool in order to accomplish those goals.
And so there, just because I was working on this with Todd, counselors, I would just like you to keep in mind that the information that I shared with you was double the full relief amount to 25,000. And from my proposal, what has been added here is the 55 through 65, the 375 category.
Mayor Walker, was what I sent you accurate? Because I made copies of that, if you'd like me to.
Yeah,
pass
it
them.
is.
Because I can.
And so Todd and I have played around also with what dollar amount, 20,000, with income limit of 20,000 as the full relief, and what that would look like. So we have the 3 options there.
So on this sheet, you'll see generally the cost estimates that staff came up with for, the top option is what we put in the budget, and then the bottom 2 options are the options that Mayor Walker and Todd Divers had discussed, and so these are the cost estimates. I'm sorry?
So, when I'm comparing these options,
That's
they all
the
have an
budget.
additional X. The difference between those is just literally the difference between those. So for example, what's proposed here is an additional 285 to the budget
That's what's in the budget now.
versus 450, which is really 450 minus 285.
No,
No, it's
450 on
in
top of
addition to the
285.
285.
Yes.
Okay. And same for option 2.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you for that clarification.
Other questions, Mayor?
Oop, go back.
All right, so city school funding, you're aware of the superintendent's request from the other night. We have over $3.3 million in operating in the budget for the schools, and another $6.5 million in capital, of which are some major improvement projects and some school rehabilitation, and of which $3 million are for the planning and design of the concepts they have for kind of centralized pre-K and the change in the Buford model to renovate that to become a 6, 7, 8 campus. Employee compensation, we're trying to make the next step in living wage. You're aware that over the last several years, we've gone from $11.70 to $13.79 to $14.40 where we are today, and hopefully get to $15 on July 1. That increase is about 4.17. We have a lot of issues with both compression and market, so the recommended COLA or wage increase for all employees is at 4.17. We have to experience the cost of the mid-year change that we made to sworn officers this year, which is an additional 4.83. We're in good position on healthcare expenses, which is great, and we're passing on no new costs to employees for healthcare premiums. And we do have an enhancement when we do go to benefit enrollment later this year with a new online portal.
So could you all talk a little bit about the, how you all came up with the COLA increase and the discussions around that?
Sure. Well, as is the case in other years where we've made adjustments to living wage, we had to put in living wage dollars and compression dollars. And one of the reasons was, the wage structure. And so one of the ways that we can mitigate the impact of going up 60 cents again, and the departments where it has an impact on compression, in addition to the public safety impact, is to level that across the organization. The other issue that we have that made this advisable was at market. We have a number of departments that are behind market, and we've been doing that study. We also know that Albemarle County is giving 3%. Lots of localities are giving that. And the budget that we're funding in the schools is to give 5% for most of the staff and 4% for others. So this made sense both for what folks are doing in FY20 and for some of the issues we're facing with employee compensation.
So when looking at the employee compensation, there were some people that were paid over that mid amount. There were some people who were under. Was that factored in to, because I know when the conversation around compression, it has been for the past few years targeted to employees who were right above that living wage and those adjustments. So how many different ways did you all run the numbers in terms of the overall impact? I mean, there are some people who will fit in to this 4.7 who are the individuals who were already above what market rate was, according to just past discussion.
Yeah. I think when we make the compression adjustments in the past, we had the capacity to do that up to a certain part of the salary structure, right? And then we create the compression at a different level at that point. And there are people who may be beyond the midpoint of their scale, which is the case in every organization. There are compensation strategies which I think would take time for us to study this, like Albemarle County, where they have very complicated formula where they try and speed people to the middle and then slow them down after they're at the middle. I don't think that we're positioned to do that kind of analysis. The main things that we did here were look at different sizes of the wage increase and to look at the possibility that maybe it should not be an across-the-board increase, that we should use this as the opportunity to go back to pay for performance and to have part of this be COLA and part of it be pay for performance. And I'll just say that my reluctance to do that is if we could capture for you just how many departments we have positions that are behind market. It's difficult for me to argue that we want to start differentiating now in year one of implementing a new performance management or performance evaluation system that we should use these dollars that way. But it is certainly a choice that was contemplated, and I would understand if you all thought that it was a good idea to spend the dollars that way.
So what's the total cost of each of those?
I think we can get that for you. It's
Okay.
in here, but if we can pull that out for you.
And the goal is that we're starting the process for the performance management system, that the next fiscal year budget cycle will actually be able to apply numbers to that? Or is it a longer runway?
Yeah, of course, at any given time you implement that strategy, you've got to have a pool that's adequate to do it. I think that you also have to have great confidence that the performance evaluation system that you put in place has been implemented throughout the organization. And I can say that some departments have done a great job with that, and that in some places it hasn't happened in the way that I would expect, and so it'll be difficult to give any increases in some departments based on that, and it requires more attention.
So Mayor Walker, we have it almost broken down the way I think you're asking, and we can get this for you, but the 4.17 COLA plus the increase in the living wage is $2.2 million. But if you want those broken out, I think we can get those, right? Yeah. The part that is just the sworn officers, the 4.83%, is $518,410. If you want the breakout of the 2.2, we'll get that to you. Yep. We just don't have it broken out right here.
And I just have a question to just remind myself. So, over the last 4 years or so, were we always giving typically a 2% COLA? Like when did, because it seemed to be that was the more typical COLA.
That's correct.
And when did that escalate?
We did last year at 3%.
So
For
you
19.
gradually went up, and that was your way to handle the compression?
No, we added funding to help address the compression
Okay.
because the living wage shift was higher than those COLA increases.
Yeah, I mean,
So we added additional dollars for that.
in general, when you're using cost of living adjustments and across the board increases, you're hoping to keep pace with market, right? I think that what we're finding is that we're not really, because other people are advancing compensation strategies outside of the general wage increase. And so our combined effect of the 2% years or the 3% year with the bit that we had for market adjustments didn't go as far as it did in other organizations where they're a little bit ahead of us.
So I have a you have a question? So the sheriff department, and Sheriff Brown has stated in a couple of times that it's very difficult for his officers or his staff rather to be able, for him to compete because of the low salary there. Are they affected by this, or are they completely separate?
No, they would receive those same increases.
Our increases, not the state's,
Okay.
Yeah,
which is better for them in 20 than to be on the state salary.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I mean, the sheriff has other questions about how we can appropriately study and compensate his folks, right? It's not about whether they're getting these increased because he's a constitutional officer. The question is, what is the marketplace for sheriff pay? How similar or dissimilar is it to other law enforcement officers like police?
Please. Okay. Thank you.
My question is on the expenditure side, what is the total amount of, I guess, shortfall that would require raising some kind of additional revenue from taxes? If
we held steady.
Yeah, if we held steady in revenue and did
Rates.
not,
You did not
right,
increase the tax rate.
right. So what is the shortfall between the proposed budget and that amount of revenue? Is it
3.2 million.
$3.2 million? Okay.
That's the shortfall that we're
That's if you
trying,
take out
that's
the
why we're
1%
raising the
in
tax.
meals and lodging. For both. For
That's
both of those,
the
3.2.
3.2.
Other expenses that we're incurring are the CIP and the debt that is related to it. As we talked about Monday night, we've put a lot into the CIP, and you've got to pay for that. And one way to think about that is each year you have a new payment that is $850,000 more than it ever was before. So, in rough terms, like a penny on real estate every year. We had a lot of requests in departments, both in their kind of base operating budget and also in what we kind of set aside in a separate part of our process for new requests. Based on all of the priorities from council and the community, we did decide to fund just a few of those things, and they're captured here. The centralized safety coordinator, which is going to be housed in risk management, but is to serve the entire city about workplace safety and training, and reduce our risk and liability. The security manager position, which again, citywide position, which will be housed in police, which will help us with facility assessments, our emergency preparedness throughout the city. There's an enhancement of about half a position for right now of a staff person that Mr. Vandiver has, because we're going to become a site for DMV Select, which should be a great service enhancement for residents, because we have the second busiest DMV in the state. And maybe if we can provide just a little relief to folks who have been waiting out there on Pantops by offering some select services here in City Hall, that will be helpful. The NDS Support Services Manager was one of the most critical positions recommended in the efficiency study that you all had presented to you by Novak. This is specifically In the chain of command under Missy Creasy, she currently has 15 direct reports, and we're looking to kind of normalize what that structure was. I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to add full-time drivers to the driver workforce out at CAT, or public transit. You know, quite honestly, with a drive time of over 2,400 hours per week, and a current full-time staff that can only staff 1,600 of those, or 2/3, that's not really the right ratio as far as what the regular salaried staff should be. We'd like to get that eventually up into the 85 to 90% range. I think our hope over time is, you know, without even thinking about new routes that might be contemplated by us just as a city or through the RTP, that number is probably 14 drivers, but 4 of them are added in this budget. And stormwater maintenance operations, these are folks who have previously been in public works. We're going to be saving money in the general fund because they are going to be funded by the regular rate by moving them to utilities. Go ahead.
So since we're not having a full format work session on outside agencies because the ABRT process was frozen this year, I did want to talk a few minutes about some of the agencies and some of the ones in particular that were that were reviewed by the Office of Budget and Performance Management. But the first bullet on here, I just wanted to bring your attention, the Seville Sabroso Festival, who normally would go through the ABRT process. Last year, however, if you recall, they came in with an off-budget cycle request to fund their festival of $2,400. I wanted to just put this forward to you. Now, if it had been funded as part of ABRT, it would be in the budget right now. So we could address this one of two ways. We could go ahead and add this to the budget for this year, or we could request that they come back before you with another off-cycle budget request, which is what they did last year. And then in the future, it would always be part of that, whatever that ABRT process looks like. It would be part of some regular budget process. So yes, ma'am.
Was this included in the, because they asked for $11,000,
That's
right,
in the
last year?
budget. So that was what was approved by ABRT.
Was this included or this was different?
This was different, and that's why it didn't come to appear in the budget, because it wasn't part of the original ABRT request last year, and that's why they came to you separately off budget cycle for this specific request for the 2,400.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add was they had said when they came forward that they were going to add this to the regular ABRT, but this was before we decided to do the process, freeze the amounts. So they had expected to come forward with this as part of the ABRT, which is why another reason why we put. In addition to the 11, yes.
So this would be on.
This would have been.
Right. So that's just something to consider. It's not a lot of money, and if we don't do it this way, then we'll just have them come back to you as a separate request, like they would have done anyway, probably. And then it'll be worked into ABRT for future or some process, whatever that looks like. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's $2,400, so. Offender aid and restorations therapeutic docket in the General District Court. This was also kind of a off-budget cycle, but it was discussed during the budget work sessions last year, but it was approved after the budget was approved. And we're also the recipient of the grant funds for this. And so that we'll just continue, just letting you all know we've continued the funding for this. The county has as well. And I believe there's an item coming before you soon to appropriate the grant funding, $50,000 for this. So that's in the budget. Regarding the agencies that saw large changes for 20, the first one here listed as JAUNT, that was an increase of over $173,000. Some of that was healthcare, retirement contributions, workers' compensation, and salary adjustments. There's also been an increase in EDA services to Charlottesville residents and a slight increase in our capital cost. JAUNT also requested 3 new positions, a road supervisor, a safety supervisor, and a program compliance manager. The city's budget only includes funding for one of these positions. So the delta is 43. Okay, I didn't see the delta there. It's about $43,000. We funded $21,654. We didn't prescribe which position they would add. The county has a similar approach, although I think they funded 2 positions. So in our budget, we just have one position that they can decide which one they want to add for 20.
They're requesting each of us provide 3 new positions?
Yes, I don't know what the other jurisdictions did. I only just know that the county put in 2 at their discretion, which ones they wanted to fund.
But to clarify the vice mayor's question, it's the same 3 positions, they just want a share of the
Share.
funding from each of us,
That's
not
right.
6 positions total.
Right,
Yeah,
excuse
yeah.
me, yes.
Yeah.
This is our share of those 3 positions.
And then, so the first 2 bullets are related to folks who would go through the process, the ABRT traditional process that we be evaluating. From here on, starting with John down,
That's our Office of Budget and Performance
those are things
Management.
that are, like, those are contractual
Yes.
things, those agreements.
Excuse
Okay.
me, yes.
Yep,
So
I'm
they had their normal review this year. They put in their applications in Zoom grants like they've done for a couple of years now. And then the OMB, we do have a joint process with the county where we meet with their budget folks, and we go through kind of a similar process through that, so.
The part that we've frozen, what is the obligation to not even touch that?
So we informed those agencies at that time last fall that we would freeze those funds. So those funds look the same as they did from 19.
Well, we can have a discussion about what are possibilities for next fiscal year
For
if
next
we're
fiscal
still
year.
stuck in the same space,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was a lot of conversation last year around joint and their request. So staff, this is what staff feels based on their request is.
And we did, that actually, I don't remember that specific conversation coming up this year, to be honest, in their request. So,
Right.
yeah, this is what they requested. The only thing we're not funding is 2 of those positions they requested. Everything else is fully funding John.
being shared with the county, so they are funding part of that as well.
Correct.
So, as I recall, last year's conversation was about their
Driver's
driver
pay.
wages.
Yeah.
Yes.
This year, it was really new positions.
Yeah, I'm just thinking just back to that conversation and just wondering just on our staff end. I know there was some disagreement last year, but there's a agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I haven't heard otherwise, and many of the discussions I had with John, it was not approached. This is what they submitted to us, so, yes, ma'am. Okay. So just a few more agencies that were reviewed. These are other contractual agencies. The library, they also had a slight increase of $89,000. Addressing salary compression, they've been working on a plan for a couple of years now. Retirement and operational cost, and then we're also increasing substitute hours in the Central Library Children's area and for shelving at Northside, which we have a share to fund as well. Under the jail, we actually saw a decrease, mainly because our 5-year average population is seeing a decrease. And although overall costs are increasing because of the decrease we saw and the shifting and how it's in our share, we're still seeing a decrease. And I think that budget's going to be approved in May of this year, of 2019. Similar story for the Juvenile Detention Center. We saw a decrease in there as well. Again, our 3-year average for child days decreased 6.6% from last year. And the ECC, very similar story. We saw a decrease of 41,000 because the city's volume of calls did see a decrease, while Albemarle and the counties and UVAs increased during that same time. So again, it's that shifting of cost that was in our favor. Okay.
So, we've talked about some things that are different in or out. I think the other remaining things that are notable is you're aware that the school board originally came to us and said, we'd like $3.868 million. We are $500,000 shy of fully funding that, although the superintendent presented you with a budget that is balanced at 3.3. In order to get the priorities in here that we thought that we needed to, we did go back to departments and ask for some different tiers of cuts, and that was a total throughout all funds of $1.39 million. And when you look at above and beyond what was in that kind of core operations, things that people were hoping to do differently in the new year, we had an additional $5.3 million in new requests that we did not consider outside of those few positions that we gave either full or partial year funding to that was on the previous slide. here's what we're really here for, and now that we've gone through the slides, to talk with you all about some of these key decisions. You know, we built this budget around the concept that we were going to need some new revenue to get the priorities in here that we had heard from council and community. But we didn't use revenue from real estate. We need to confirm with you all whether that was or was not where you want to be. We can certainly add that revenue back in to pay for priorities or to balance out that you think that I got it wrong and the wrong revenues were selected. Meals tax, I've tried to make the case about that this is fair at 6% and where it is situated throughout the state and what the impact is on local residents, and that it is clear to me that it's less than real estate. Should you decide that you don't agree with that, we'll need to remove just under $2.5 million from the current budget. And similarly on lodging tax, a little bit over $800,000. The CHAP, we've already put in a new system with some tiering that we think is a good plan for providing more relief. If you decide that you want to go even further with that relief than the system that we've provided, the options that have been generated would be $325,000 or $450,000 above that $285,000. So cumulatively, either $600,000 or $735,000. We just talked about the schools on the last slide. I think the other most notable thing is, when Mr. Davidson and I spoke with the Planning Commission, they thought that the Affordable Housing Fund should have a general pool that people should apply to still, despite the fact that this budget is heavy on affordable housing investment. There are $10.3 million in FY20 and $32.5 million over the course of the 5-year plan. It could be that you decide that we need another million or 1.55 million, as some advocates have suggested, to go into that general CAF pool. It could be that that can be taken out of the current investments that we've already made, or that you want to find those dollars on top of all the investments, effectively changing the 10.3 to either 11.3 or $11.8 million in FY20. So these are the key decisions before you and us as a team as we work through these, what is really a compressed schedule during the next dozen days.
So one
Mike, can you?
defer to you. Go ahead.
On the general fund, contribution to the CIP is increasing by 1.46 million. I might have missed it, but can you talk a little bit about how that works?
I could. It'd be so great if Chrissy would instead, or Ryan would, because it's really about the change at year end, correct?
No, that was the,
Sorry, page 21.
Oh,
That's the city he's talking about.
you're talking about on top of the 850. Go ahead, Ryan.
I believe what you're referring to is that our cash contribution to the CIP on an annual basis, and this is the piece that we have traditionally funded through the revenue sharing. And as we have increased the cash projects, a large increase of that was the affordable housing projects for this year. We've had to pay for that. We did have some cash that we were able to add from year end, but that did not get us all the way there to our cash needs and our cash funding needs within that CIP. So we had another 1.3 million from the general fund transfer on top of that, and then the 125,000 for the mall infrastructure repairs that Leslie had mentioned earlier. So
This is, okay, so let me just, in my pea brain, so there's the surplus at the end of the year, which is cash based on receipts. So that's that several $1 million. Then that goes into the contingency fund, which is cash. It's not funded by bonds. And then you're saying that we're adding in more cash from the general fund into that cash part of the CIP to pay for the affordable housing commitments?
we're not going to be adding that into the contingency. It's going to go straight into the capital program, straight towards those projects that we would have to cash fund. The $3.2 million worth of cash came from that year-end balance in the contingency that you're referring to, and that is going to be appropriated straight in from that contingency into the capital program to be able to fund those projects on the non-bondable cash-funded side of the ledger.
So isn't this, I mean, you have a CIP budget, and you have an operating budget and you have I mean, it's not a firewall between them, but they're different budgets for a reason. And I understand how at the end of the year, we have a tradition of putting the surplus into the CIP, but it seems odd to be putting general fund revenue into the CIP because it's a different, am I missing something? I mean,
We do have that.
they're not supposed to be routinely commingled, right? Is that,
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying they're not supposed to be, but they're,
We're not commingling. We do have a financial policy that we have to put at least 3% of the general fund expenditures in cash into our capital program, and that is what this general fund transfer represents. And this is above the we will be above the 3% threshold that we have set
Right.
because of the other cash that we have put in there. But again, a lot of these projects most of these projects that are on the cash side, we've gone out and we've tried to see if we can bond some of these or move some of these to debt fund, and we can't, so we have to come up with the cash to be able to fund these particular projects.
And we don't every year plug the year-end surplus into the CIP directly. So, right, so this year, and for 20 we are, but what's typically happened is it's gone straight to the CIP contingency and then programmed out later. Some years we do program it into the CIP, which is cash, but for the most part, the cash that goes into the CIP is that transfer from the general fund, and that's the 3% policy. That's what has to meet that 3% threshold. Now, because of the large influx in that other cash, we're above that, obviously. If you cut that, though, you have to cut projects. So that's
right. I mean, this is being
just
driven principally by the major CIP projects. So
affordable housing
PHA
on the
and
cash
CRJ
side.
And then all the others. So you would have to, okay, I got it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Siri,
Remember,
yeah.
in the $10.3 million that are in the 20 budget in the CIP for affordable housing. Because you remember, 20 is the budget, the other years are the plan. 7.3 million of those dollars are on the cash side. It's only the CRHA, and CRHA takes cash to fund that too, eventually, in your debt payment. But the impact of that versus 100% on the dollar cash, which is the the 900,000 for supplemental rental assistance, the 500,000 for rehab, and the 5.9 for Friendship Court. That is essentially, while it is fully segregated from the operational budget, all of those dollars could have been operational dollars should we have chosen to do so. They count against the cash when it comes time to balance all the budgets.
I have were you about to go ahead?
Okay. So, not saying that, again, this is what we will do, and I think I posed this question the other night, but I would be interested in hearing again. For the needs that we have, and specifically in regards to the decision points, I'm sorry, 25. I'm looking at 25 and 26. I'm just going from there. So the needs that we have specifically for the decision points, and when we look at the funding requests from the schools, the 500K, the CHAP adjustments, if we went on the high end of the 450K, and if we looked at the 1.55 million for the general pool for the Affordable Housing Fund, essentially that gets us to $2 million, correct? 2.5, excuse me, so 2.5. That 1% from the mills tax would roughly get us there.
No, this is already,
That's already in. Okay, so this would, in order to reach those, we would need to
Raise more taxes.
do another, that's what, and that's what I wanted to.
And we can't put 3 cents on the real estate regardless. I mean, I'm not
Right.
supportive of that.
That's what I was essentially trying to ensure. So how would we,
Or identify $2.5 million in cuts. Those are the choices.
yeah.
And I just like to get a clarification. I'm making sure I'm understanding the impact of the real estate tax increase. So I'm looking on page 6. So when I look at your comparative table of 2019 impact to taxes paid compared to the 2019 impact to taxes paid with no change in the tax rate, and I'm just looking at 1 cent tax rate increase, I'm seeing for the first tier of $150,000 of assessed value that the dollar change in taxes paid between a no change in tax rate to a 1 cent tax rate change is going to be $16 a year. That is $1.33 a month, correct? So, and then when you go down to the higher income tier, and you're looking at the 650,000 assessed value real estate, you see that there's a change in taxes paid with no tax change at a 537 goes to 608. That's a $71 change. And that means that's at $71 a year, and that means $5.91 a month. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're looking at, we've got to look at what's happening, a monthly change, depending on which tier of housing you're in, which is kind of associated with income level.
We had a chart at one point that showed the increase for folks just from year to year because of the assessment rise. Wait.
This does this. That's the, if you view this as 4 tables, really, or 5, I guess. If you look in this chart here, change in taxes paid, the column that says 124, 207, 289.
124 is the absolute. That's what people are feeling
That
right
means
now.
people who are in those 150,000 houses, right? It's true what Ms. Galvin has said, that there's an extra $1.33 if we raise the tax rate. But they've already going to experience
I understand
the
that.
first $10
Right.
of every month's budget.
But I just wanted to underscore that the change of a penny is not causing the big jump. It's already the increase in
Exactly.
assessment.
And
but-
we were talking about the compounding effect being the
And so,
concern.
but if we're also talking about raising meals taxes, you got to look at that monthly impact too, of that meals tax change.
Right, which we have. And we did that the other night. It's not in here, and we did it in deciles. And so at the lowest tier, this same 12,000, the 12,000 a month tier, that impact is $1.21 per month.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, at the lower tiers, they're getting kind of close in
And
terms
at
of
the-
their differences.
At the very, if you change it the 1 cent and ignore
1 cent.
and ignore the 8.7% increase, that is true. But at the very highest end, it's all between $1.23 and what, $6.73 a month in impact if you do the meals tax change.
If we were to specifically say, we know we want to target a number like additional $2 million or $2.5 million in revenue, we know the meals tax would bring us the most quote-unquote bang for the buck. Is it possible for us, and I think I asked this the other night, for us to write a resolution in which those funds specifically go to addressing the needs in which you described up there, i.e. the $500K for the schools?
Yes, those are already in there.
I'm asking about an additional 1 cent. I understand that. I'm just asking a question.
Like going up 2 cents?
So I'm asking so that I can clarify, so that we can see where we can get those funds. Not saying that's what we want to do, just asking. But is it possible for us to, if that is the route we chose to go, write a resolution in which we would specifically have those funds go and address the needs of affordable housing and the schools, to be specific?
I think the concerns we heard about that Monday was that we should be doing that already with any increase, versus there were some concerns that the money isn't going where it's
So where
supposed to
should-
go.
that's what
And
Peter
then
said.
the way staff has described this, we can only count this for 1 year.
Don't get $2.5 million every year.
Yeah, which,
Correct.
is there a way, or do localities, if the rate is increased,
to 8%, is there a way to always look at the difference between what it would have been if that rate hadn't been increased versus what?
So you know directly to where to apply those monies.
Yes, because we do a calculation every year that tells you what each penny was worth. So if the penny, in this case, the penny is worth more than it was when the last tax increase went in. But it is conceivable, I guess, that at some point at the future, you could do that analysis and realize the penny yields less than it used to. To date, the meals tax for each penny discretely makes more than it did 4 years ago when we made the change. 4 fiscal years, guys? Am I right? Yeah.
So the
So we
question.
already have a portion, I'll just clarify, to align with what Mayor Walker was saying. A portion of the meals tax goes to debt service right now. So that we dedicate every single year. So that's for a total of almost 2.5 million. And every year we dedicate that much. That doesn't go to the operating budget. It goes straight to debt service to help pay off debt, obviously. So that was done many years ago,
That was,
2003 or 4, I think.
yeah, I believe so.
When they increased the rate from 3 to 4%, and they took that extra percent and put it into debt service. So there was a precedent for that, but they increased the rate, so they didn't miss anything at the time. If you say you're going to take that, what you have in the budget now, you'd still have to identify, I guess, $2.5 million if you're going to take it away and dedicate it to what you had suggested for those additional funds. Unless you're saying you're going to increase the rate, which you were just talking about just a little bit ago, but.
Just trying
yeah.
to get different ideas for us to be able to address. I'm not going to call them shortfalls, but I'm going to call, they're things that I think we have to figure out how we're going to address, and I don't know if there's much more that we can cut back in this regards.
Funding your priorities is really what we're
trying to do.
attempting to do in the budget. And so just to be clear and reinforce the point, we could earmark any dollar, whether it was from meals or real estate, or Ms. Galvin's talked about TIF or things like that. Just remember that you only spend the dollar one time, right? And if you spend it on a cost that is recurring, and you say this penny on meals is for schools, that penny, that $2.5 million in this case, since they put it into their base, is the same $2.5 million every year, unless more meals are sold.
Right.
I'm just wondering, my colleagues, if on the page 26, would it help for us to talk about whether or not any of those we want to add into the budget, and then we can have a discussion about what combination of taxes to meet it. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'm open to having that discussion.
Can I talk about the CHAP increase for just a second? Well, not a second. It's going to take longer than that. And and Todd, if you can help. One thing I think would be helpful is, do we know the income limit at these ranges that you presented in terms of the real estate tax? What the increase would be? Like the housing ranges, do we know the income limits at, like, up to $150,000? Do we know, is there any way in the city to know the income limits of the household?
You mean the incomes in the individual house?
Yes. We don't have that. Okay, that was one question. So in the estimate for the 450 and 325, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's also a potential savings. You still provided the estimate that way? The real estate,
There would be savings to the real estate tax relief program to the extent that we think people would start applying to CHAP.
yeah.
That's already factored in here.
Because
Huh.
that would be
Yeah.
a more generous program.
This is the net of that decrease and the
Yeah.
increase to CHAP. So,
I'm trying to cook all that into the final.
yeah, we just didn't break it out.
Okay, so in one of the, one of our emails back and forth, you had that you thought that increase would be up to $466,000 with a savings with the real estate tax relief of $365,000.
That,
That wasn't,
yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
okay.
Some of these numbers have kind of matured as I've done more analysis on
Okay.
this. The first round that I didn't really take into account the 8.7% increase in real estate values.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that may have affected, you know, some of our early emails. This I've tried to take into account as much as possible.
This is also at the 95-cent rate, so this is not at the higher rate. This is at the rate that the budget's proposed at. So that would also affect the cost
Yeah.
if the rate was increased.
Correct.
And the other information I just wanted to give that the estimate is that there would be over 294 families who meet the income limits of $25,000 or under who would qualify for that full relief.
This is under, under the 12,500 income threshold or 20,000?
20,000, under 12.5 is 146.
I've run those numbers again. I
Okay.
think it's more.
Okay,
Yeah.
So what are they now?
I can get that to you.
Okay.
At 12.5, I think it's going to be more like 200 families.
and that's including the real estate families you think they're gonna come over?
No, that's just the number of folks I expect to apply for the CHAP grant at.
So we had how many applied this year?
I'd have to look.
Hold on,
back.
I have
can't
that
even
somewhere.
How many families is that?
If we went to option 1, where full relief was granted to everyone at 20,000 or less, I'm projecting 388 applicants.
1,000 or 20,000?
20,000.
25,000. What's the 25,000 one? I'm calling option 1 25,000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
I'm
okay.
sorry. I'm backwards. Yes.
So what is it?
No, I'm back.
So option 1 at 25,000 is the 388?
No, 519. Sorry,
And then that up to 20,000 is the 388?
388. And you know, I mean, these are scientific best guesses. I
So
wanna
that's
stress
more,
that.
okay, is that more than who has applied in the past?
Yes, I think it would be because, number one, we're increasing the income threshold at the top end. And then I'm also putting more people, I'm assuming that more people are going to go from real estate tax relief to CHAP because now CHAP's going to be much more generous
Yeah.
than it was previously.
So do we have a comparison of those savings on the other end? So can we get that too with the real estate, like if-then situation? If they come over to CHAP, what is the savings that we would, because that's a line item in the budget somewhere.
If they come, yeah, I mean, I can work out, and I think I've got it somewhere, where I am assuming the reduction, I can give you what I assume the reduction to the real estate tax program would be next to what I assume the increase to CHAP would be. Is that what
Yes.
you're asking for?
Yes.
I can do that. Yep, I can do that. But like I said, that difference is kind of baked into these.
The difference is baked into this additional
Correct.
X and Y.
This is
Oh,
the
okay.
net of those two numbers.
This is the net.
Correct.
Comfort that these additional budget dollars would actually cover should everybody come and make application. You know, my concern is, we'd be making a pretty significant shift with the new tiers already. 65-70% of houses in the city fall into the assessed value that we're talking about, 370 or lower, right?
Right.
So,
And then we're increasing the
that makes
income.
me think about if everybody who has a house that qualifies, and I know income's a factor, comes out and applies, could we end up with undermining our revenues in a pretty significant way? You imagine that this would cover it. I just want to make sure if you're going to put it in, that it's really adequate.
Yeah, I mean, don't get mad at me now.
Well, I know that we can't afford to give away 70% of real estate
Right.
tax. I do know that.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out, obviously, with AMI being what it is and all that, we might imagine that some percentage of folks are in those houses who exceed it. But I do want to also
But we have
be
those
practical.
numbers too. I mean, at least last year, we asked about the income limits in those, the incomes in those categories.
By
Right.
census or,
Yeah, but I don't
No,
know
I understand
where
that.
the incomes live, I mean, by address. I mean, I think this is as best as humanly possible, Mike. I don't know. As best as I'm able to.
you are the best that's humanly possible. Is that what you just said, Tom?
That's what I'm saying, baby.
Okay.
Question then, so that if, given the current budget proposal of keeping to 1 to 12.5, it's a cost of the budget of $285,500, and we can live with the deduct in the revenue. We've figured that out, from the property tax.
285 is the delta that we already baked in. What was the current program funded at already? Just so that we're talking about the total value of CHAP.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
So I'm saying is that the
500,000?
cost
Yeah, I
of
don't know.
this program is not only the 285,500, because there
Correct.
is a deduct in real estate tax
It's the
revenue.
new cost for the manager's budget proposal, yes, for the tiers.
So, but have we figured out what that
And to go from
deduction
50
in
to
the revenue would
65.
be? For the real estate tax revenue?
Well, the other was already a fixed cost. It was carried over from budget year to
Okay,
budget
so-
year.
Yeah.
So the total impact is higher, but 285 is the new cost.
It would be the,
That's
yeah.
what we need to budget for.
Okay, cost for,
Plus the
for
consideration of these new
for
proposals
the
from Mayor
administration
Walker.
as well as the loss of revenue. It covers both.
It-
That's all I wanted to know.
I've not really added anything for administration. I mean, yeah, this is just the grant.
the
I'm
grants.
still gonna be handling it with the same staff.
So I think like in totality, even with Mayor Walker's suggestion and requests and the others that we see, there is going to become a decision for all of us on council in terms of if we say that these items are really important to us and they're priorities, as we've been saying for a while, how much political will and capital are we willing to put into addressing these issues? Because from a housing perspective, they have not been addressed for some time, many would say. From the school's perspective, they've been getting a steady increase, but we see the need in which they are now. And like the community has clearly said to us that housing is a top priority. Figure out a way to fund it. Will we have the will to be able to do just that?
All of the devil's in the details.
I
Okay,
agree.
so I'm just thinking, for example, on page 26. I can tell right now, I'm willing to put what the planning commission recommended for affordable housing fund for flexibility at $1 million. I'm willing to add that. But then that tells me that, so our current budget shortfall is 3.3 million? That will, well, the one that, when I say shortfall, is the reason why your budget includes the meals tax and the lodging tax increase is to cover what amount of money? And I think Mike asked that. Is it 3.2, 3.3? What? It's 3.3. Okay, so my request was then gonna make that shortfall, without taxes, like adding more tax burden would be now 4.3. So
Yeah, you had
that's,
$1 million.
I'm just trying to get us to understand what we
Right.
need to cover. And then once we have that 4.3 million in our head, my head, we gotta play around with what the taxes need to do to change. It may not be what's recommended by staff, it may be something different. But I'm saying that right now, to make it to the 4.3 million alone, we're gonna be looking at real estate tax, meals tax, and lodging tax. Okay? I mean, or different combinations of it.
So for me, man, just one quick second. Sorry, Ms. Signet. For me, I appreciate you saying that. I agree with you, and I think, as you just eloquently stated, that helps us figure out like what the next steps are. If there are more of us who also agree with us going there, and I think you're absolutely right. As you normally hit this on the head, the devil in the details, or the angel is in the details. So I like to hear that we are willing to go that route. So I appreciate that. Well, some of us at least.
So, and Wes, or Dr. Bellamy, I appreciate you asking the question too. So I still, just as one member, I'm still where I was the last time we talked about this, which is I think that we ought to rely on the revenue that the economy has created, which is
Okay.
in this range of $6-7 million over where we were before. The budget is 5% above, or whatever percent it is. In a progressive city that really wants to help people, you're always going to have a lot of drivers, and we have a lot this year. There's a huge new piece this year, which is this decision to move beyond the model that we previously had with housing, which was to rely on the independent agencies to do. And we've taken this significant step this year, which is the city is going to fund affordable housing requests to the tune of millions of dollars in CRHA and PHA. We never were willing to do that before, and that has had that's like a very significant thing to do. And then there's the school requests on top of that. So I'm looking at all these things. The only thing that I will support is going to the lodging tax to generate increased revenue to fill that gap. So that's where I am personally. And I see an increment of $800,000 there. So if it were up to me, I would rely on the revenue that the economy has generated and go to lodging to make up any difference that the economy wouldn't. But I don't think that I have, that there's, and then I would find savings from, and try to have it distributed equally among all these drivers and kind of do, but I know Mr. Murphy has done, I'm on the Board of Social Services. I mean, they were requested, like city agencies, to find savings there at social services because of the significance of the cost drivers and all these other very laudatory areas, especially housing, and so it's been a lot of work to get to this point. But that's where I am personally.
Appreciate you sharing that, like your perspective and where you are.
Are very good.
Yeah. No, but I think like us just getting it out and saying where we are, like that helps a whole lot. So I appreciate you saying that. Ms. Hill, you were saying something. And I
I
cut
just
you
feel
off.
like
My bad.
the hard part for me is there's still the CIP portion of it, and the cash funded portion is treated like operational dollars, and really looking at those, because those are some big numbers, and the timing in which we need those dollars, and then also even on the debt side, and I think Kathy might have asked one of the questions today, and we're just trying to get some clarity around, even though when you're looking at what's on the bonded side, it's not like apples to apples because it's just a portion of the debt service, which is a different number. But for me, it's like when we look at the cash, and I know and just full disclosure, I've asked Mr. Murphy about this already. We have 5.9 in for Friendship Court in one fiscal year. And do we need that all now? No, but I understand the risk that you take when you don't plan for it in that way, and what kind of hold that digs for you in the following year. I'm with Mr. Signer in that for real estate, I mean, I'm just not going to support any more increase in our real estate tax. The meals piece, I'm continuing to try to be open-minded about. I just see where we are, and I'm trying to understand, is there opportunity for us to kind of give one more year of those businesses a chance to thrive? Seeing some of the numbers that they've showed us, which have been different than what we gathered from staff, but I certainly hear all the pieces that staff has pointed out there. So I haven't made a firm, absolutely no on that one.
Fence about meals, no way to real estate, and lodging, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You looking at me like, did I sum
I
that up
don't
right?
like the on the fence because I know that I've read that
Oh,
in
not
the
on the
paper, and
I'm
because
sorry.
I'm leaning towards I do not want to do it, but I'm also I'm recognizing we have a lot of things we're trying to do here, and I want to understand what kind of decisions we have to make to
But
get
you're okay
there.
with lodging.
Lodging, I'm okay.
And I apologize, please, for the reporters here. I was not trying to put words in Ms. Hill's mouth, because we know how sometimes things can be reported. She did not say she was on the fence. I said that. That's how I characterized it. Don't put that in her mouth like that. Thank you.
So for me, I really it's hard to have a full, robust conversation without understanding the capital
Gotcha.
side, both cash and bonded.
Yeah. But see, I think this helps, like, us knowing, where were you? Mayor Walker?
Oh, go ahead, Mayor Walker.
Do you mind sharing like where you?
I would support, I mean, based on what we have presented, what we have said is a priority, the fact that I think you all, the four of you, really need to look at being willing to cut also. And that's very challenging for you all.
Wait, how is this you all? Because you.
It can't be challenging for Mike and I because we're saying we're recognizing that what we're saying is we're
No,
going to
I
have
hear
to make
what you're
some
saying
cuts.
now, but I'm just saying, like, even in the past, like when we have the conversation, when we're talking about things like ABRT, looking at, Mike has shared before that they've asked our staff to look at potential cuts, but then if the school system increase comes in and this is what they cut and said that they could balance and cover as a result of that, there's still this discussion for us to figure this out, when I think they also had the money in their reserve account from the conversation we had to cover this amount if that's what they
Right, that's what they wanted to do.
wanted to do. When we were working on the CHAP program, that's why I asked for those different tiers that were, my first was 25, looking at 22, and that is just trying to figure out how to keep homeowners who are low income.
Right.
If we're talking about what percentage 25,000 is of our area median income.
Right.
But I did look for other options and, other, income limits, and knew that, they needed to be presented
So-
to you all too. But when we're hearing the conversation, even this affordable housing fund, Kathy, your comments about, supporting the planning commission's increase in that, even looking at when we were talking about the discussion around that the CHAP program is less than that, and we're talking about keeping homeowners who are lower income in the area, how?
Get the conversation going.
No, I understand.
Because I haven't even really said my position yet.
So, and, just looking at some of those other line items, and then maybe some of the stuff that we've committed to with housing and schools, if we're not gonna make it a priority, which I'm not hearing that anybody is saying that, then we are gonna need to be honest with the public about what that means to make it a priority. We also don't wanna stress our staff out to continuously try to cut from an area when their requests for their needs were, 5.9, right, million?
About 6.6 million more than we funded.
6.6 million. So I just think we need to just keep all that in consideration. And the impact of the, the taxes, in the area. As a low-income member of this community, when I have heard the arguments about meal tax and lodging tax, and we totally ignored the just cost of food in this area, minus that 1%. So you can't even get a cheeseburger on the downtown mall for under 20, maybe $15 and some fries. So we are talking about what this 1% will do, but we have a pretty pricey area that, in my opinion, they target those prices to that 35% within the budget that we talked about of who is eating here, and and the tourists. But we all pay those increased amounts because of how much tourists, I guess, are willing to pay for food, or upper income people, because it's a major challenge. But I don't look at this 1% increase, 1 cent increase for me and my family, thinking that we are going to do anything more or less as a result of that. So that, I'm only one member of that community, but I don't think that's the driver. The conversation that's usually had is how much you have to pay for the meal to begin with, and how much you have to pay for food if you want to eat out in this town, in this city, at all. And so that, I didn't hear any of that discussion from the restaurant owners, or who they, the amount of money they are charging for food to begin with, and who they are targeting with those prices, which they're really, high prices for our area. So I would support. Is that, what are you laughing at?
Because I thought you would stop and then you hit the
No, I'm
remix.
just
You hit
trying
the
to put
remix
this-
on us, my bad.
So I mean, I support, I'm open to all of these discussions. I would support, even though it's a challenge for me in every area, I would support, besides lodging, you know, we stay together when people visit. But, so really don't have, that's the only area that wouldn't impact me, but I would contribute in every other area, you know, the real estate and the meals tax. I'm a homeowner, all of us are homeowners, so we would all be paying an increase in tax rates. And I know that would vary based on the, you know, cost of our home, and that is different. And so I know that this would impact me too, but if we got some of these major needs met and it helped with that, I would support them.
Dr. Bellamy, since you're running, can I just say one other, but it's not as extensive since you're running this gathering. I had raised this at the other session. It's not in here, but I still would make a case for putting the cigarette, as a substantial increase in the cigarette tax in here for public health reasons. Understanding everything, every year we brought this up with the differential to Albemarle County, people having to drive, whatever. If it would result in some amount of revenue that $50,000, $100,000, if we raise it substantially and it results in a decrease of people buying cigarettes, great. But if we get some revenue out of it, great. It's a good public policy for public health reasons, and I would support it as a way to meet some of this gap. I just wanted to say that. I don't know, it didn't seem like there was support for it last time, but
I'm
well,
down.
but still, it's,
down.
if it could fill in $50,000 or $100,000 and we're looking at the alternatives, to me, it's not just not objectionable, it's actually has good effects.
And I would
So-
just say again,
Kevin's been trying to go.
I
Can
only
I
ma-
just say something about the cigarette tax really quick? Because I think I would ask you to just talk to some of the small business owners who sell cigarettes. I've never smoked. I think people should not smoke. I've dealt with family members who have negative health consequences, major ones, from smoking. So I understand your position, but where I think it won't make the public health dent is that we're sitting in the middle of Albemarle County and they can just go to a store in the county and purchase.
I've heard
And-
from
and
small
purchase.
businesses that sell them. I'm willing to deal with that cost, but I appreciate that.
So Mayor Walker, can I say something? So, and I mean, one thing about this job is that we're the only ones that know what each other is going through. This is a really tough decision. And I also just want to point out that our local government is being expected to do an awful lot of heavy lifting because the federal government's not meeting the needs of affordable housing or transportation infrastructure, and the state government is not meeting the needs for education. So the only one left holding the bag is local government. So I just, that's a preamble, just, it's us. We got to cover these costs for housing and infrastructure and education. So now we're looking at a situation where, all right, how do you pay for that? And I'm also looking this $55 million trajectory of public school expansion and modernization looking at us. That, like the housing fund discussion, is going to need its own 20-year spreadsheet. We're going to have to figure out how to put $10 million every year towards public education, just like we're trying to figure out how to put $10 million every year for housing. We have to think, and when I look at infrastructure for transportation, and I look at the rate at pay, the rate that the state funds, all the streets and intersection improvements we need, we get like a fraction of a percentage of what we need, the whole region. So folks, we got to start looking at this $10 million every year for fixing up streets like Elliott and intersections like Hydraulic, because the state's not doing it. So in that in mind, I think, and on top of it, we have, as a local government, we don't have progressive tax tools. We don't have income taxes. We have to deal with the most progressive taxes that the country allows us to do. The meals tax is one of them. It's right up there with the sales tax. It proportionally hurts low-income people more than wealthy. The property tax, the real estate tax is because thankfully more and more people of all kinds of income levels have been able to own homes, not as many as would like. It's still relatively more progressive than a meals tax or a sales tax. Lodging, we all like to think that it's something that we can pass off to our tourists, but when we go travel someplace else, we're paying high taxes too. But so lodging is comfortable for all of us because we think it's always somebody outside. So I'm thinking that we can't keep kicking the can down the road about the real estate tax. The real estate tax has fundamentally always been the tax that funded public education. Fundamentally. And everyone doesn't want to touch it. I did that little differential analysis between 1 cent tax increase and what already is happening, and it's very close to raising a meals tax on a monthly basis. So I just wanted to put that in perspective. Yes, the taxes hurt, but to me, and I don't. We can't do it all at once. I am willing to add another million to that 3.3 gap. But in order to do that, I'm looking at a combination of a 1 cent real estate tax, a half-cent meals tax, and actually even 2% increase on the lodging tax in order to make that shortfall. When you do the math, I did the math. And you might have some extra over, but that's where we're at. And I don't see how we're going to avoid the looming need for public education is not just this year for 3 million. We can't fool ourselves.
Yeah. So, Ms. Galvin, I really appreciate you saying that. Ms. Bogart, can I ask you a question in regards to Ms. Galvin's point? Can we do a 0.5 cent on meals tax? I thought I heard before we couldn't.
Yeah, I'm looking at Todd.
It has to be. It has to be
Really?
one.
I thought
yeah,
you
I thought they
could.
said we couldn't.
Please look at that.
I don't know of any other localities that have.
There are several localities that have sent. Lynchburg, for example, is at 6.5%.
Okay.
So
that is a possibility for us.
And if I may, that
Yeah,
way
sure.
everyone is sharing the pain. We're not going to one trough all the time. And I was here in 2015 when we went and did the restaurants. The restaurants can't bear the burden of basic needs that the whole city has.
You got a comment?
I've said this before, I see the rise in assessments as effectively increasing taxes, and it's affecting people disproportionately. I looked at the assessment where it was like 10th and Page neighborhood was one of the ones that was the hardest hit by this last year's assessment, and their increases were in the teens. And so I'm just struggling that we're exacerbating that problem, and I don't see it as that, yes, we can report that have not raised this rate since whatever year it was, but decades. But effectively, people are paying more and more and more, and I just don't have the energy. I mean, I'm only one, but I just don't have the energy to pile on top of that.
No, you're not the only one.
I could, because if we did raise the real estate tax, adding another tier for the CHAP program would make sense to me. And I think the combination of taxes that I came up with gives us some margin to do that. So I'm very empathetic to that, Councilor, Vice Mayor Hill. The other thing I looked into, it used to be the real estate tax could be written off. Local taxes could be written off. With the recent Trump tax cut, it's made it extremely difficult for people to itemize and take advantage of that. However, I did discover, and I sent it out to everybody, that properties that make money off of rentals, they can fully deduct their local and state taxes from their federal taxes. So that mitigates the impact on renters.
And then, so even to your example, thank you, Ms. Galvin, I like that solution. But to your point, Ms. Hill, no, that was that was really smart. I didn't think about that.
It's your meeting, Wes.
No, it's not my meeting. I just had a question. Don't do that, man. So, Ms. Hill, like you brought up, Vice Mayor Hill, Heather.
Yeah, that's right.
We're in their
So-
living room.
Right, we at my house. So, your point though, in all seriousness, about one of the places that neighborhoods that are hit the hardest, 10th and Page, which I think is, like you're right. But then, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Divers, I'm looking for a little help here, or even Mayor Walker, because I know y'all two worked on the data together. Wouldn't that be one of the neighborhoods that would receive, based on like the incomes that we've seen, that would be one of the neighborhoods that significantly receives benefit from the CHAP program?
I would assume so, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
based on who we see. I would caution you also that, I can't tell you what to do one way or the other, but people are still going to have to apply for these programs. People
Right.
are going to have to proactively come in,
Yeah.
sit down, open their books, and let us go through them every year. So it's, it's
Yeah, it's
not
not
quite
just
as
a-
surgical as, maybe we'd like to think.
But as long as the option is there, then the onus is not only on them, but on us to get the word out, encourage people to come in
Sure.
if they qualify.
Sure.
But the first part of it is having the option available. And if this is one of those neighborhoods, as was just brought up, then to a certain extent it offsets.
But
Or correct me if I could be wrong. I'm literally just trying to
it
think this
could
out.
potentially,
Uh-huh.
again, we have income brackets between that, when we stop at the 65 to the area median income of the 80, 80, what is it, 86.4? Got so many numbers on in my head right now. Confused. But again, I think that the argument that people who are lower income is the reason that we should not raise the meal tax. I'm having a big issue with that argument because I just don't think that's being, really honest about
Stated.
about that. And I'll try to do a better job to, try to get people to chime in on how they feel. But the conversations that have been had about whether somebody's not going to eat out because we're really probably talking about the 10 cent increase and the 20 cent increase on a $20 meal and a $10 meal. And that's just not accurate.
I think we shouldn't boil it down to what the value of any one individual meal is. I think that.
Oh, no, I'm just
that-
saying, and if you're talking about those two, from the conversations I've had, that's what I'm basing
Yeah, I
it
think-
on. But it's not significant, even with the 50 and 100,
We agree.
okay.
And so what I want to say is at the lowest income level, the impact at that $1.20 a month is, $14 or $15 a year annualized. And for people who are making, $12,500 or less. And so I guess that, Ms. Galvin's proposal, she's divvying up the tax burden a little bit differently. And I appreciate that. I guess that to me, the difference in the impact when you're already experience an increase in real estate expenditures. I don't know that the difference in doing the 0.5% and having a 60-cent increase per month versus the $1.20 is meaningful to that family in that income tax bracket. And so if there's going to be political will expended at all on your part in considering meals tax, I believe that the impact on the general public, and keep in mind, it's only 65% borne by our general public as opposed to visitors, is so small at between $1.20 and $6.73 a month, regardless of how high your income gets, even people who make over $150,000 a year, that it is a fair and appropriate way to meet your priorities. Understand that you all are in very different places about that.
I just want to make clear, I have not had a consumer tell me that they're concerned about this. It is the business owner, and it's because even though it is passed through, it's just, there's a belief, and they have obviously experience with this, just when people are looking at rising food costs and them wanting to pay their workers certain wages, that people are coming to restaurants and they just look at their ticket and when it starts to, hit a certain hurdle, there's a mentality of this is now expensive to me. And I agree that's a small portion of it, but I think that the feeling is that this is just one more thing that's creating a barrier for them to feel like they can be successful. And so again, it's not the consumer that we're hearing from in this, it's really the restaurant owner. And I just see how important our restaurant industry is to the city because these are independent businesses that are not chain restaurants for the most part. And it's important that they thrive because otherwise we could find ourselves losing revenue if all of a sudden they're finding themselves.
And
vulnerable.
I want to chime in on this too. I also, I'm thinking, my memory is going back to the debate that we had about parking rates at the 2 parking garages. And we went into litigation that was quite costly and that went on for a long time over a proposal to basically increase the hourly rate about 50 cents. I think the dispute was 50 cents or $1, $2.50 to $3 or $2 to $2.50 if I remember. And why was that so important? It was important because it's public good, but it was also important because for whatever reason, as we all think through the day-to-day life of what makes a city start to feel like it's becoming too expensive, that hourly rate to park downtown felt too expensive. And I think with cities becoming in such demand like Charlottesville, it creates a supply and demand problem for lots of things. It creates a lot of pressure on real estate prices, a lot of pressure. Everything becomes more expensive in a 10 square mile city. So the cost goes up on a lot of things. And that's, to me, I want to really avoid, people talk about the cost of coffee, the cost of hamburgers. A lot of that stems from the high cost of a lot of things. And especially with the county right next door to us, that creates a significant perception. If Charlottesville is an expensive city and we have started going down this road and we have a county right next to us that is not, then that will create a perception around the city that we are a high cost of living city and haven't really tried to tap the brakes on it. And I'm concerned about that becoming the impression of the city and our reputation.
If I may, I would just offer that I don't think you walk into any restaurants in Albemarle County and say, oh, the hamburgers are that much less, right? And so I would just say that, when you're making a decision about going out and you're going to spend $40 in the city versus $40 in the county, if you want to talk about the delta of the last 40 cents, I think we should have that discussion, okay? But I don't think that people will decide I'm going to drive to Albemarle County because my $40 meal is going to be 40 cents more in the city. I believe that, people decide what they want to eat and they go eat it, and that they worry about, can I afford the first $40, not the last 40 cents?
So they might not, I guess my response would be, and I appreciate it, everybody's making arguments in good faith and trying to figure it out. That's, to me, a little bit of a straw man because it's not so much the marginal one meal decision, it's the overall impression and the reputation as you think about having meals one place to the other over years and years and years. And I do notice when I go to a high-tax city, when I go to, a place where there, like in Northern Virginia, there's different places where there's a lot of tax on food, and you do notice it. When you look down your bill, like, that was another 75 cents, $1.20 than I saw on the menu board. I do notice it. I think a lot of people do.
So I would agree with you, but I think we're missing, in my opinion, for me, it's understated the fact that most people already think that our city is expensive. And it's like you're not going. I literally, I don't do this as much anymore, but my wife, she counts the number of people who look like us on the mall when we're eating, because she always says that there's not a lot of us there. Our family is fortunate enough to be able to eat down here with our 3 children, but like the prices on the mall already exclude a lot of people. So when we say that we're like this meals tax is going to have a negative impact on folks coming on, it's, in my opinion, it's not. That's overstated. This place is already expensive, and I'm not saying just go make it more expensive just for the sake of doing so. But like I think it's a false argument by saying that this is going to have such a negative impact on lower income folks because this place is already super expensive.
And can I share
Sure.
something?
Sure.
And
Sure.
to talk about trout again or not, right? If you want to talk about that, at that trout costs $24 just for that, You don't have a side yet. And if you want a side, you're gonna pay $5 per side. So most people want two, right? So you're talking about $34.
Come with two sides.
Huh? Where's that?
Come with two sides.
Where that?
Two sides on the right, lower right. All dinners come with two sides.
Where you see that at? You making up stuff?
Regardless, if it's
Oh, no, I'm
$25
asking.
if it's 20
Where you see it?
If it's $25 off the rip,
Okay,
then
all
we're
right.
saying
So
it's a
that's
family of four,
$24.
That's $100.
Huh?
If it's $24 off the rip for the
Heather
meal, that's
was
not
correct.
counting the drink.
There
If
was
it's
a
a family
little-
of four, that's $100. They're not worrying about the extra.
But this is what,
percent.
yeah. So if there are other, so the restaurant industry has been leading this argument about low-income people and the effects that it'll have on them. That, I think, is the problem for me with this discussion. So if we can get some different facts about who's affected and how, because if you go to those restaurants that we've been hearing from, who's there? So and I'm just asking for us to just take an honest look at, whether they're using low-income people who they don't even serve, or whether it's factual information. That's all I'm asking.
In some of the restaurants that I've talked to, they're most concerned about the folks serving the food, honestly, and that people will round up and they want their total bill to be a certain amount, and therefore they're taking it off of tip. And obviously tip is a big portion of the income for people who are waiting tables. And so that's been something that they've raised as a concern of theirs, is that it's going to be affecting their servers.
And may I make one more comment, please?
Please.
When you look at, I'm going to bring up the difference between meals and real estate tax, okay? The real estate tax, and it's a reality of the city, the assessments are going to keep going up, and also because of redevelopment. So when you do have your rate, your millage rate, whatever you call it, set at a certain rate, it actually has a compounding effect on revenue. At some point, the meals tax is going to just die out. I mean, you can't keep taking blood from a stone. The numbers of restaurants aren't increasing. They can't keep, even though people are complaining about how expensive the meals are, boy, we're sure using the revenue from those meals in order to pay for things.
Which means that people are
So I'm
eating.
just saying that there's going to be a limit to that, whereas
It'll be a cap.
for the long haul, looking at what we have in terms of education, housing, and infrastructure, you're going to need something that's actually more robust and more progressive and grows every year on its own. At some point, the meals, because there's not a growth in restaurants like there is in our redevelopment and our development, and we are very much using our growth to pay for the things we need. That's what you call taxes.
I would agree with you.
And if each penny on real estate was worth less than it was years ago, then we would agree on that point. The fact is that if we go back, and we can do some historical analysis for you and say, in 2015, that penny was worth X. But the fact that it's almost worth $2.5 million for every penny, and that keeps growing over time, means that the prices haven't stopped anybody from eating. In fact, more people are eating out and more revenues being generated than ever. And I would argue the reason that a hamburger or a trout is $24 is just as much, if not more, because real estate has gone up so much, and landlords who own all the buildings that the real estate that the restaurants are in charge those folks higher and higher rents. And that, if I charge you $10 for a hamburger and the tax is not really ever doing anything but passing from me to the local government and the state, that's not the same thing as having to incur the cost in my shop for higher rents from my landlord.
And the only other thing I just want to add, and I will stop after this, is that, I look at Mr. Engel. I mean, we all have to work together to understand the value of new development on our tax base. And, even something as simple as the skeleton in the sky a few blocks from here, that has real impact when we're not collecting on the revenue. And so that's the kind of revenue I want us to be chasing in the years to come. Is
I agree with you.
meaningful development. I'm not saying all development is good, but I think that too often we just have this negative there's a negative perception around this development, but that's really where the new dollars should be coming from.
Yeah, I mean,
I've been chasing him for 2
Well-
weeks and he ain't returned my call.
well, right, so when the landmark deal was just destroyed at the last minute, that also erased $100,000 more of tax revenue every year. I think it was going to be over $1 million a year that was returning revenue. And that is one of the ways that cities can not get blood from a stone. You can create revenue through intentionally working on these projects that pay multiples for what the tax credit or what the incentive package is. And that's what we've had a conversation about that. And that was, but, as we're looking forward strategically to meet all the stuff we want to do.
But we don't have that yet.
Right. it's a
And we
shame.
also have to talk about historically what those developments have meant, who, and whether they've been inclusive or not, whether they've contributed to displacement of individuals, and all of that ties into that discussion too. Now we're open for public comment. So if you would like to speak, okay.
So just wanted to mention also that in tomorrow's newspaper, you will see the ads for the public hearing for the meals and lodging, and they're advertised at the rate that's in the budget right now. There's a 7-day requirement, so I had to get that fulfilled so we could meet our deadline. So just letting you all know, so when you see it, it'll be,
We've still got
we're covered for
latitude.
that side for now, but if that changes, absolutely,
It
yeah.
could go down, but in Ms. Galvin's proposal, if the one went up, we would need to re-advertise again.
Yeah.
You had
The-
suggested 2 cents on
I was
lodging
saying,
at some
I was
point?
saying, so we'd have to re-advertise again for the lodging tax.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct,
We'd
right.
need a new 7-day.
And how much time do you need for that?
7
7.
days.
7 days.
So,
let's
so
make a
if,
decision in the next 7 days.
no,
You need
7 days
notice. Okay.
before the public hearing, the advertisement has to
Okay.
be in the paper. Okay, that was it. Thank
So if you would like to speak, you can come to the mic.
My name's Paul Henderson. I live on 1704 Rugby Road in Charlottesville. And all this talk about food is getting me really hungry. I haven't had dinner yet, but the hamburgers are too expensive, by the way. So I share your viewpoint that Charlottesville is a very expensive city. I came here about 1.5 years ago to take a position at UVA, and I could not believe the price of housing in this town. And I came from Princeton. And so I took a look at the budgets in other university towns. So I looked at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, which is a similar kind of town to Charlottesville, Auburn, Alabama. And I just looked at their budgets for 2019. So these are your approved budgets, not your currently proposed budget. So Chapel Hill, North Carolina, budget is $109 million. They have a higher population than Charlottesville, 57,000. Asheville, which has 90,000 people, has a budget of $124 million. Auburn, Alabama, 63,000 population, has a budget of $149 million. And then the king comes in here, Charlottesville, $165 million, with the lowest population of all 4 of those cities. So I just looked through the budget numbers, and one thing that really becomes very glaringly obvious, and I don't know the history of Charlottesville as well as you all do, but Auburn spends $14 million on police. Charlottesville spends $41 million on police, just police. Chapel Hill, $15 million. Asheville, North Carolina, which has double the population, $27 million. And we're spending $41 million on police. Right. So if you look at the number of officers who actually serve on the police force in those towns, 71 in Auburn, 90 in Chapel Hill, Asheville, bigger city, 222, and Charlottesville is 158. So what I would like you to do in your discussions, and I think that you guys have a great discussion. I mean, I really admire your volunteering and being on the council, but think about reducing expenses and expenditures. I mean, I read the budget, and there's a $3 million study for school reconfigurations. $3 million? Really? Wow. I thought, yeah, I don't even think UVA does that kind of study. $3 million, that's incredible. So I do think that you are known as a high cost of living, and we're recruiting faculty, they come in and they say, wow, it's really, really expensive to live here. Our graduate students find it very, very difficult to live in the city, and they take fellowships at other universities as a result. So I think you really have to start looking at reducing costs, not increasing revenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Takia Jones. I am a low-income resident of public housing Hardy Drive. I was listening to you, Mayor Nakaya, about the prices of the food downtown. I wouldn't know nothing about it because I cannot afford it. I do not go out to eat as much as I used to because I'm saving for a house for Habitat. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I moved into housing April 27th in 2006. I was on drugs, crack, cocaine. The neighborhood and the people that I hung around has sucked me on down, but somehow I got the strength to pull myself together. Along the way, I've met Wes Bellamy. He was a mentor for my son. Kathy, you've came to some of my graduations from all the different pilot programs that I have done through housing. Nakaya, we've been in an internship together with the City of Promise. I've been hanging around a lot of positive people trying to do a lot of positive things, and I heard about the funding for affordable housing, and that's why I'm here, because it's been so hard for me to try to get out of Hardy Drive, and finally I have a chance to get out of Hardy Drive from being a Pathway homeowner, and I'm halfway there. I've helped other people, single fathers, single moms, to be able to have their dream to be a homeowner. And I've helped so many people through the program of Habitat, and they're homeowners. And now it's my chance. And I believe that I've done everything that I should be doing to better myself for my children. And my grandson, I have custody of my grandson. I got a year ago when my oldest son passed away from a heart attack. I used to be 338 pounds. It changed my life when you lose your child at a heart attack at 25. And so I feel that I've done everything, and I'm still trying to do more to better myself. My husband's gone through the Go Driver program. He's graduated. He drives the bus. I'm getting ready to do the Go Cook program. So please think about low-income people in housing that are trying to get out. It's hard to get out because we can't not afford the living in Charlottesville. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Is
you
there
gonna get
anyone-
out. You gonna get out. That's right.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hello, everybody. My name is Latita Talbert. I'm a pillar in the community. I live at 1949 Sweet Hollow Lane in Charlottesville. They say Charlottesville, but because it's only, and I'm in Albemarle County, so I get to taste a little bit of the price increase in Charlottesville and in Albemarle County. But I'm here today because I heard about the funding stream, the allocation of money that was going into affordable housing being taken away from the Habitat program. And I'm kind of Vice Mayor Hill on the fence because I am a public housing resident and I'm also getting ready to be a homeowner through Habitat. So I understand both sides. And I tried to think of what to say, so I had wrote some stuff down. I'm gonna try to get through this as fast as possible. I started out as a public housing resident and was then selected to have a Section 8 voucher. After having been vouchered out, I was able to enroll in the city's Go Driver program where I was licensed and hired with the CDL by Charlottesville Area Transit, which you all call CAT. Excuse me, my goal has been to become totally independent by becoming secure with a job and purchasing a home. Knowing there's a process to everything, I was accepted into the Habitat program that prepares and conditions a person to become a homeowner that is considered low income. The city of Charlottesville has identified that there is a very strong need for affordable housing for those of us who are considered low income or extremely low income. And Habitat has helped in many ways the city meet the need for low income affordable housing by making and creating and working with us to become homeowners. Out of 200 families so far they have housed that are low income. These homeowners, that number might not be right, it might be more or just a little less. These homeowners, some come from homelessness shelters, overhoused or underhoused homes, public housing. We've had bad credit. We've had just couldn't get a break, not being able to be good budgeters or good constituents over the things that we have. Habitat has created classes to have us to come in and to learn how to be good budgeters. I've cleaned my credit up. I have A1 credit now. I have a job, and I've been considered to be a homeowner, but then now I'm being told that that can be taken away. For those of you who don't know, in order to sustain home ownership through the Habitat program, we have to do credit repair, we have to track our spending, we have to be accountable to a budget, and all of these things are included just to help us be successful as a homeowner. The conversation about taking funds away from the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Funding allocation for the money for that normally Habitat uses to go along with the program to get us to be homeowners is being taken away. And so I feel that some conversation needs to go on around that. I've heard a lot of conversation today, and I've heard a lot of conversation in the past about what we need and where we need to put the money and where it needs to go. But what I haven't heard is how that affects who's being affected by the money that's being taken away, which is us, the homeowners, the low-income homeowners, which Ms. Walker noted that, we're already struggling to be homeowners. We're already struggling to do the things to, step out on where we need to be. Am I saying that that money shouldn't be allocated to other programs, or we should pick and choose where they should go? No, what I'm saying is that we should have some conversation on seeing how we can split the dollar and everybody can get the change from it. I would like to be a homeowner, but if funding is taken away, I'll be stuck on Section 8, and some other people will be stuck in public housing. If I am a homeowner, then I'll be able to give my voucher back to someone else who's less fortunate and give them the opportunity to step up and be a homeowner just like me. And so I'm asking City Council if you all can have a conversation at least about how that's going to affect the homeowners of low income through Habitat if the funding is taken away, or some conversation about how we're going to get some funding to replace the funding that's being taken away for the low income residents. I would love that. And I just had one more. I would like to know, and this is going back to your budget today, I would like to know if there has been any research with the stores to see how many restaurants have been affected by the cost increase and have had to close down because there's been a cost increase in Charlottesville. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dan, do you mind telling us what the message you've given to them? The message that they have received, because it's my understanding that the funding is not, do you want to share?
Well,
I
could address some of that. My name is Jeanette Kawachi. I'm a city resident, and I'm also the Chief Partnership Officer at Habitat for Humanity. I also attended the City Council meeting on Monday, so I wanted to make a comment on a couple of things. One was in regards to some information that was put out there at the meeting when Mr. Murphy referred to $1.1 million in available city funding for affordable homeownership. Since that night, Mr. Murphy has graciously worked with us to clarify those actual figures. And I believe he has informed council of that new information, but for the public record, since we have been approached and asked about that figure, I'd like to clarify that. What he was referring to, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was 3 open grants that Habitat has with the city from the previous 5 years, and that had totaled approximately $1.4 million. And so we have been able to, Dan had submitted documents to show that of that 1.4 million, 1 million has either been spent, requested, or completely encumbered. And so of the remaining approximately $430,000, those have been allotted to 14 lots that we are currently pursuing in the city and that we expect to acquire by the summer. And so that effectively, by the beginning of the city's fiscal year, that balance will be at 0 or very close to it. So I wanted to.
So by the end of this fiscal year?
Correct.
So July 1, you all will be at essentially 0.
Correct.
And you need 500, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Murphy.
I would just reinforce that certainly I've talked with Mr. Rosenzweig. I've shared with you all their data. I would say that the documents that they've provided show what their plan would be to spend the dollars. The documents I referred to were quarterly reports that they submitted totaling $1,070,000 that could be drawn down. I guess that the question that remains for Habitat is what new dollars would be needed for 20 only, based on the fact that if you fully expend the $1 million in the next 3 months that has been outstanding over this last 5 years of grants, how many lots and properties would be under development, and would they really all happen in that FY20 year? Or is it fair to say that there will be plenty of volume under development that is more than can be done in one fiscal year? I can't answer that, but I'd love to hear that so that we can weigh out what the actual impact is for 1 year of it not being in the budget.
Sure. Thanks for asking the question. Shrink down a little bit here. Yeah, so this is pursuit money. This is lot pursuit money, and we will have spent it all down by July 1st of this year. The money that you're referring to, the $1.5 million or the $1.4 million, is over 5 years. A big chunk of that was Harmony Ridge, which was spent. We have spent money on lot acquisitions, which were in those reports. Unfortunately, what you got sent was a PDF of a live document where the information actually had been rolled up. So what you got sent from your director of NDS didn't show the actual, it didn't show what had been spent, which was in those grant reports. We made a mistake in that there was a place where we didn't total up those dollars, but they were in the report. They weren't in what you saw and what you sent me. But yeah, we have 14 lots under pursuit. Typically speaking, we try to leverage $30,000 per unit of city money to build a home that costs us all in $170-ish thousand, depending on lot costs and expenses and whatnot. And so we try to discipline ourselves to 30 a lot. Our goal is to build 20 a year next year and the year after that. And so, roughly speaking, we need 600. I think that, unfortunately, this conversation has gone off the rails a little bit. I'm not advocating for a direct allocation to Habitat. I'm advocating for allocation into the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund so that we, like other people, can put a proposal forward, and those proposals can be weighed against each other, and City Council can choose the ones that are most strategic, that are most highly leveraged, that fall deeper in the AMI scale, that meet all the requirements. So I'm not asking for a direct allocation to Habitat at all. We're just kind of caught up in this because the place where we would go for a new proposal would be the CHF.
But even with that, that comment that you just made, if you have your future homeowners thinking that if you don't get money, which based on what you just said, there would be a potential that you would not get the funding in the first place, for that to weigh heavily on how this process is currently set up. So I think maybe there is a miscommunication among the information that you may be giving them or the way that it's being interpreted.
I'm not sure I understand.
So the comment was made that they could potentially not be homeowners if they didn't get this funding. And based on what you just said, if you are put in a pot with other potential developments, there could be a potential that you wouldn't get funding.
Well, I'm not advocating for a direct allocation. I would welcome that. But the truth is if we don't get funded, we simply can't afford to build in the city. We won't be building going
So the
forward.
two families that spoke tonight, if you did not get an allocation, they would not be able to build their homes, is what you're saying?
It's entirely possible, yeah.
Possible, or is that what is going to occur? I'm just trying to figure out the storyline that they are being told.
I'm not sure I understand what you're
Okay.
implying.
You know, as Dan mentioned, given the cost of developing in the city, I mean, I think, you know, we have been transparent with our home buyers about this process. And I think, you know, it depends, right? And so we currently have 52 people in our home buyer program right now. And so some folks are much further down the line. And so those 14 lots are not going to cover, obviously, everybody. And so if we don't, you know, they may become homeowners, or they may be significantly delayed in becoming homeowners. And what happens when people get delayed in that homeowner pipeline is they drop out. You know, and so it's not as if we said to them, if we don't get this funding, you're definitely not going to be a homeowner. We talked about the significant impact of losing the potential for this funding and what that meant for our ability to continue developing in the city. I mean, certainly we will never leave our homeowners and abandon them.
I just want to make it clear that we are not leaving and abandoning Habitat either in this process, and I think that's sort of the narrative that's being put out there, and that was not what city staff thought, so.
Right, and I would never, go ahead.
So I just want to make a point of clarification. Dan didn't dispel any information to me. It came about from the meeting the other day, and then we had some conversations amongst ourselves, some of the homeowners and others, about the situation. And maybe I didn't use the right wording or the right language, but what I was addressing was the Affordable Housing Fund with no money being going into there, knowing that that's the money that they normally use to build us homes, and me being on the threshold of being able to afford in a low income affordable home and become a homeowner. That's scary to me because, like you said, it's so many people that's applying. If they don't get it, then I'm just, you know, I'm not going to say I've done everything for nothing, but that's a dream. That was a goal of mine that will be, you know, smashed. I mean, who wants to be on Section 8 for the rest of their life? And I'm not putting down anybody that's on Section 8, but I want to get out. I want to move forward. I want to be more than just Section 8. I want to be more than just housing authority. And that's not taken away from the people who are living there. I'm just saying that Latita wants more for Latita and for her children, and this is something that could potentially affect Latita. Thank you.
All right, so just, are y'all okay with that?
I'm
Okay.
Maureen Burke. Oh, this is good enough for me. One of the things is with city funding, it's not the only funding that we get, but some of the funding that we need to get for Habitat, we need city funding to get other funding. The Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program requires that we get 25% from the city because it's an entitlement city to get their funding. So if we don't get city funding, we don't get their funding.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? One more time for one more comment.
Hi, my name's Annie Stupp. I'm a member of the Charlottesville Low-Income Housing Coalition. So thanks once again for prioritizing redevelopment of public housing in Friendship Court, as well as many other affordable housing programs. The Housing Coalition just wants to say that we support a permanent revenue stream for affordable housing in whatever form that may take. This includes restoring funding for the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund. $1 million, as the Planning Commission noted, that would be sufficient. 1.5 would be better. And that would ensure a flexible pot of funds for all potential housing projects such as homeownership, homelessness, et cetera. So we urge you to explore all the different options. Kathy, you mentioned a synthetic TIF at the council meeting the other night. We also support the potential for tax increases. CLIC specifically supports the meals tax and a real estate tax. So we understand the potentially regressive nature of a meals tax, but as Councilor Bellamy and Mayor Walker, you've noted, if you have $100 to spend on a meal, you probably have an extra dollar to spend on a meal. So that will go to affordable housing and other needs. And as far as the real estate tax, Ms. Galvin, you made a good point about the monthly cost being fairly low, especially for high-income families. But even for a middle-income family, they have the resources, we have the resources to offset the costs for the most vulnerable in our community, for the most low income who actually need housing and need education and need other services. We have the potential to do this. And let me just say that personally, this is not a CLIC stance, but I support a lodging tax. And Mayor Walker, like you, my family often stays with me, but I'm going to have a lot of family members coming here soon, and they're going to stay at hotels. And honestly, if I tell them that some of this funding goes to affordable housing and to other critical community needs, that's a selling point. That's a marketing plan. I have traveled extensively. I've eaten at a lot of restaurants. So have lots of my friends and family members who have a lot more money than I do to spend. It is an incentive to add a dessert onto your meal, to book a hotel. We should be telling people that this money is going to meet the most crucial community needs. And we know that affordable housing is an absolutely critical community need. So we should be prioritizing this. The community has spoken, and I think that people who have been disincentivized to come to Charlottesville because of many terrible things that has happened in the last few years, would be incentivized if we actually told them where their money is going to go. So please consider all forms of revenue to support these, to support affordable housing and all of these different needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any?
I just want to wrap by saying that, we'll certainly be talking about the capital improvement program, which is inclusive a lot of these affordable housing issues next Thursday. And I think it makes sense based on the amount of discussion that continues to happen about the CAF and about particular agencies like Habitat, that staff will spend some time with those folks during this next week so we can really give council the information you need to make a decision.
Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned.